So we'll start with our usual soft introduction. That just gives everyone else a minute or two. We've lost Maggie. So for those of you who haven't figured it out yet, after doing 4 weeks of this and face-to-face and all sorts of other stuff, hi, I'm Gordon, and I'm lead tutor for this. And I'll just get the rest of the team to just say hello and introduce themselves. So Maggie.
Hi, I'm Maggie Toohey. I am a computing teacher at Douglas Academy.
And Colin.
Hello, Colin Lamont. I'm computing teacher at Barhead High.
And Ian.
Hi, I'm Ian. I'm computing at BFAC in Pennycook.
And I'm at Edinburgh Academy, because somebody has to be. Pretty much it, I think. So a few reminders. As we go through the sessions, please do feel free, if you're on Twitter or X or LinkedIn or MySpace or Bebo, please do tag us with the Upskill with STACS hashtag on anywhere you post.
I mean, if anybody's doing that on Bebo, they deserve a prize, surely. We're also recording these sessions, so we assume that if you're still there by the end of the introduction, then you're okay with that.
And hopefully we are all on the Miro board now. If not, the link was pasted. And just in case it was before you joined the chat, I'll just paste it up again. And do feel free to throw in a nice reaction, like somebody just put a thumbs up there. I think that may be Brendan. So move on to a quick reminder about the need for upskilling. We've been looking at the Nat5 hire and the advanced hire reports, and we're looking at this kind of focus and the suggestion more on the implementation skills and going through the remaining steps quite quickly. I mean, we know our pupils, they prefer to be implementing rather than analysing and evaluating, because that's just writing and that's boring. So just a quick reminder, we're doing this kind of holistic view of the whole process.
So there's also some of the fundamental skills that a range of candidates across Scotland have found consistently challenging, and we've kind of tried to tackle them over the previous 3 sessions and then also this one to try and help support you guys and build a wee sort of network of teachers supporting each other through shared discussion and resources and development. Yeah,
it's all about sharing. It's all good. It's all about us helping each other out. We're all in the same boat, teaching the same subject. We want to make sure that we're sharing that as far and wide as we can. During the session, please do watch out for camera freeze. You may need to unthaw it, but it's the audio that's important. It's what we're saying, not what we look like, fortunately. We might use breakout rooms. I don't think we're going to be using breakout rooms tonight, so I'll skip that part. Couple of reminders about the Miro board. There's pointers flying everywhere.
So just listen out for kind of when we're directing you to particular places. The person who's leading might also use the bring everyone to me feature, just so you're looking at the right board.
Aye, and if you do get lost and have to rejoin, then we'll get you back in. And if you just stop and say, look, I lost connection, can you go over that last couple of minutes? We'll quite happily do that. And navigating around the Miro board is relatively straightforward. And yeah, we'll remind you to park your cursors. We've also got our non-presenting tutors, Brendan, who's monitoring the chat. So if you've got anything, either put it in the Miro chat or into the Google chat, and we will pick it up.
So yeah, Brendan's sitting there in the background, ready to answer any questions that you might have as we go along.
Yeah, and that includes from the tutors. I'm sure we will have questions as well. So tonight's session, we're going to be looking at the box model and the calculations associated with margins and padding. We're then going to look at some examples, and we're going to give you a bit of time to go and play with some of Ian's extremely professionally built websites that aren't full of errors at all, that he broke the other day. Things that aren't displaying correctly. You have a chance to edit the code and see if you can kind of sort them out, and then show you some debugging options for use with web pages.
So just if you haven't been to the previous sessions, then we've kind of talked about these things called golden threads. that follow kind of all the way through the development, right the way from requirements through to evaluation. And that's based on the comments from the higher and the Nat 5 course reports over the last few years. So hopefully some of the things that we're showing you today fit in with that, but also you can take away and use with your class as well.
So let's make a start, and we'll hand over to Maggie and myself, who will take you through a little bit of the box model.
Okay, now I'm trying to upskill my Miro board knowledge, so I am going to try and bring everyone to me and then go into present mode. Maybe one of my colleagues could let me know if that worked, or you give me a thumbs up.
That for me has worked perfectly, and judging by the thumbs up,
Perfect.
it's looking good for everyone.
That's great. So tonight, it kind of follows on from what we did in the last session, where we talked about floats and things, and now we want to start putting content into these and how we lay out that content on a page. So we're going to start tonight with the box model and understand how it impacts on using CSS. So the CSS box model is used when talking about design and layout of a web page.
And as the name suggests, it's essentially a box that wraps around every single HTML element, and it consists of the content, the padding, the borders, and the margins. Yeah.
Okay, now the diagram on that frame there explains the box model, and we've drawn it out in that way with a detail of what one each does, and it lets us see how the margins and paddings allow us to space elements and borders, and allow us to create a border around each of the HTML element.
So if we look at that diagram at the top, we can see right in the center the content, the stuff that the user will be seeing, be it a text or an image, a heading, a list item, whatever it might be. Around the outside of that, we've got padding. Padding clears an area around the content, and padding is always transparent. Next to that, in green, we can see the border, and as suggested by the name border, it's a border that goes around the padding and the content. And I think sometimes a lot of the kids miss or don't get quite the idea that the border is between the padding and the margin. And the margin on the outside clears an area outside the border, and again, is transparent.
Okay, now if we look further down that page, that frame, sorry, there's a bit of HTML code, and then what has been produced by that HTML code on the right hand side. And if we look at the CSS, the kind of internal CSS there, we've got a width of 300, a border of 15, and it's solid green, a padding of 50, and a margin of 20. So if you look at what that produces, we can see the margin, the green border isn't starting at the same place as the text above it. So that's showing us the margin. Then we've got the green border, and then within that, the padding is around the text that's there. Okay.
And you'll also see our big yellow sticky note of warning that it's really important to remember that the width of an element does not include the padding, the margins, or the border, which again, a lot of our pupils sometimes don't seem to get that idea. So it's really important we stress that to them.
Yeah, because sometimes you'll find that they just tend to throw numbers into things, and that there is a kind of method in it, which we're going to try and... So I've moved on to the next frame. I hope everyone has too. So it should be headed 2019 assignment example. So we're going to look at the example here of having to do a calculation in order to position your elements correctly.
So from the wireframe up in the top left there, we can see that we require two elements side by side, and below them, an element taking up the whole width. So we need to remember our knowledge from the last session. We talked about floaty things and pool noodles. And if you haven't watched that the video is still available and will be for some time yet.
And I thoroughly recommend it. It's excellent stuff. So we've also got the HTML code and the CSS code and really the outcome, what the website should actually look at. But how did we come to the decision about the sizes we use for margins, paddings and width in order to achieve the correct result and one that matches the wireframe design?
So let's do the maths, although Maggie and I, we're both qualified maths teachers, so we actually reckon that arithmetic is the better word.
Okay, so we're now on to the third slide, and we still have the CSS at the top there, and let's do the maths and what we're trying to aim for. So often what I've seen with pupils, they just try to fire in numbers to try and get elements aligned or spaced in a certain way. But if they could just sit down and have a look at the wireframe, that there is a way of doing it. So we have a width of 1,000 here, shown from the body CSS. And this assignment, you know, that was in the assignment CSS when the pupils got it. So they could have looked at that and have seen that 1,000 was set there. From the wireframe, we need a 10 px margin between the top two text boxes.
So why have we not set the margin to 10 px?
So you can see there that the margin in the early and adopt is set to 5. But what we have to remember from the box model, that the margin goes round all the elements. So it's not just giving a margin of 5, it's a 5 on each side for each element. So if you add the two together, you end up with 10.
Oh, I see. So
You can use margin left, margin right, margin top, margin bottom, but we've just set a margin, so it's given us 5 all the way around.
So a 5 px margin around both sections will give that 10 px margin in the middle, and then that in total makes 20 px margin. They do sort of 5 at the left hand side, 10 in the middle, and 5 at the right hand side.
Perfect. Well done. Genius. What about the padding then?
Oh, let me see. We need a 10 px padding in both those sections, and that will give us a 40 px padding in total as it covers both sides. So 10 at the left, 10 at the right, and then same again on the second section.
That's right. So in total then, so we've got 40 and we add our margins onto that. So that gives us 60. So what do we have left then?
I know you're asking awkward questions. So we started with 1,000 for the body.
Yeah.
And we've used up 60. So 1,000 take away 60. Hang on a minute. I need a calculator. 940.
900. Yeah.
We've got to get those two sections to fit in. So 940 divided by 2. Oh, it's too late on a Tuesday night for this. 470 pixels. So that's where the 470 comes from.
Yeah, that's where it came from. So it's kind of working through that the pupils need to do, and not just, sometimes we even say web can be trial and error, but if you can get them to do a calculation, so that's brilliant work. Now, notice, just to talk about the bit below, that from the last session we learned that the third panel below has to use the clear both in order for it to be positioned below the two panels and go back to taking up the width of what we have there. This example is taken from another assignment. I think it was 2020, this one. And although the pupils weren't asked to do that, I've just kind of amended it and looked at it from our point of view. And again, for maybe giving them an example of how you would work through these calculations. So the question this time is, we don't have a body width. So given the wireframe that we've been shown, what should our body width be so that we can match that design?
Yes, the infamous 2020 assignment that didn't happen. I remember it well. So let's look at what we've got and calculate what the body width should be. Looking at the wireframe, we've got 3 sections to fit in, and from the wireframe, each of them is 310 pixels wide.
Okay, so I'll keep track here. So we've got 3 times 310 pixels. So at the moment I've got a 930 at the moment. Okay.
Okay, I'll take your word for it. You're clearly better at that than I am. And then we've got 2 margins of 5 pixels.
Okay, so why are the margins set up in that way? Because we've got a multi-column and a last column.
Mm-hmm. So, I mean, if you look at the third panel, it doesn't have a right-hand margin. So I think the multi-column class, if I look at it, it's setting up the first 2 columns with a right-hand margin of 5, and the last column class doesn't have a margin set.
Ah, I see. That's quite a clever way to do it. So a wireframe, sometimes you've got to sit down and problem solve it before kind of diving in with numbers. Initially, they all look the same, but if you split it up in that way, then you can pick out almost like repeating patterns, and that third column isn't within the 2 columns. Okay, so that means we're at 2 times 5 margins, so that's 10. And I'll add that running total algorithm in my head here. I'll add that 930 to the 10, so we now have 940. So is that as complete then with a body width of 940?
And no, not quite, because we've still got those paddings to consider. And it's a padding of 10px in each of those panels.
Okay, of course. So that will mean 6, because we've got 10px on each side, because it's a pad, and we've not specified a left or a right. So that will be another 60. So my running total in my head is saying I had 940. I'm going to add 60. So our body width would be 1,000.
Absolutely perfect.
Okay. One last wee question. Often I see body margin auto. Can you explain that to me? And have you ever used it?
Oh, of course. And I use it all the time. Despite the fact it's not really in the arrangements, it is a very common thing to start seeing. And I don't think we'd ever ask the candidates to actually implement it as part of the assignment, but quite often it's provided within the pre-built part. So what you can do is you can set the margin property auto to horizontally center the element within its container. So that's taking the body element and horizontally centering it within its container, which is the browser itself. The element then takes up the specified width, in that case 1,000, and the remaining space will be split equally between the left and right margins.
Ah, right. I see. Just it is quite often put in an assignment CSS, so good to understand what that means.
Yeah. And so I think the big piece of advice there is see it, know what it does, leave it alone.
Leave it alone, yeah. Okay. Right. So we've given you 2 examples there of calculations. Now, if you could give us some feedback, that would be great. But I think these kind of small tasks like that might be something that you want to add into a starter lesson, or a wee finisher lesson, or even have a wee booklet of, give them a wireframe and see if they can work out them, because it's not always apparent from a wireframe that there is that problem solving element to it, from looking at the elements and figuring out what classes they would go into and which ones are repeating patterns. So hopefully that you've understood what we were talking about there. We've got a wee bit of feedback there.
Why are we counting the 4 sides and not just the left and right?
I think we have to count for each element. We're counting a side, a left and right in each element. So those are the 4. We're not counting top and bottom at all here. We're just counting left and right. Okay. Right. So there's a whole feedback board. I'll stop presenting at the moment. And if you want to put any feedback on there, Brendan's just typing at the moment. We'll have a wee look at his feedback. Yeah.
Yeah, the kids that struggle with calculations, they do struggle with it, and that's where the strategy that I kind of take is, you know, getting them to almost measure things out. You know, use maybe using a ruler and getting them to draw out the wireframe, where, you know, they draw it out to what did I say, 1,000 millimeters. That we don't do that because that would be a meter long. You need a big bit of paper. But that can help them visualize it and think about, well, if that's 1,000 millimeters and I need a 5 millimeter bit of padding, they can start to see how things space out. So there's maybe a little bit we can do to help our young people with their numeracy skills there, as we should be doing.
Yeah. Strategies to check their own working. Yeah, I think it is maybe doing quite a number of these, you know, and even it could be a wee homework exercise that you put, or someone said a great wee starter activity there. I think it's kind of repetition for kids is helpful. They are allowed a calculator to help them do it. I've seen that kind of style exam question though, where it may well come up at some point.
Yeah, and I'm just seeing a wee bit of feedback there. I often find the calculations are out by a pixel or two, which is very annoying. Yeah. And actually, that's what we're going to be going on to, an element of that next with Colin and Ian, where we've got the two kids side by side, same code, different output, and how we can support young people when they're ostensibly doing the same thing and getting different results.
Yeah, yeah. Okay, I'm going to hand you over to Ian and Colin, who are going to, first of all, give you some examples of code.
So in the session last time round, we explored what we've kind of come to be known as the floaty stuff. It's from moving the content around the page, and we've now had a wee bit of understanding of the box model. And I think what Maggie has taken us through is kind of maybe change how I'm going to teach that going forward. Yeah.
So now it comes to actually putting this knowledge into practice.
So on frame 2A, you can see the wireframes for the index, the visits, and the events pages of the Lowland Wildlife Park.
So the wireframes clearly show the position of the content on each of the pages and the spacing in between each one of those pieces of content as well.
So we've shared these wireframes with the developer.
But unfortunately, they weren't very good.
Yeah, thanks. Yeah, I built this website yesterday, but I've intentionally and possibly unintentionally made a couple of errors.
So your challenge is to try and identify these errors.
So if we go on to the next, if I can work out how to move, if we go into the next frame, and where we've got a screenshot from that slide. There is links, but I cannot grab hold of them because I'm in presenting mode. So I'm going to take out the presenting mode, and I'm going to try and grab that box that's hidden and get rid of it. So if you want to have a look at the website, there's 3 ways you can go about it. The top link will launch your browser, and you'll just view it as a Joe Blogs member of the public. If you want to go and look at the code, you can of course take the public version and view source. Or there's a REPL project if you want to go and fork that REPL project. Or indeed there is a folder also in Google Drive if you want to download it. I'd probably say I would like to think by just looking at the website as Joe Public, you might be able to pick up some of the errors.
So this is your chance to now have a wee kind of wander around the index, the visit, and the events page and see what kind of errors you can spot.
Yeah, so we're looking to make sure that what I've implemented matches the design. And I know it doesn't.
So if you're having a look and let us know what you think the errors are, and you could maybe even let us know how you might go about fixing them.
Yeah, so if you pop those onto frame 2C, and I suppose this process of looking at a website and going, does it match design, as part of the testing at National 5, where they've got to make sure that a website matches design. So although the website is a higher website, the skill that we're looking at here is a National 5 skill. So there are errors on each of those 3 pages, index, visits, and events. Hopefully all the links work. I did check them last night at 10:30, so I'll just go and check them again. Yep, the REPL one doesn't work. I will go and fix that now. Probably because I've not made the REPL public.
A Brendan error.
Yeah, I've made the REPL's private, so that should be it sorted now. I'm going to make the other one public as well.
Yeah, that's me able to get in now.
I've taken to keeping my REPLs private because my higher students have worked out my naming convention between a website they've got to work on and the finished version. So they were able to change the URL and get the finished version of the website. So
I feel like they get some sort of credit for problem solving.
well, yeah. Hopefully the errors that I've tried to put in are ones that some of them are ones that I've seen higher candidates do. And particularly I suppose the error that's mucking up the homepage.
Although you can never like second guess just how wildly different higher kids can make it.
Totally. And as Gordon said, it's that idea of sitting with 2 kids and the code's identical or looks identical, and I suppose the way I've implemented this website, when you look at the CSS, if the CSS applies to the whole website, so the nav bar, the header, and the footer, that's all external CSS, but the stuff that's to do with that layout of the page, I've just put it in the page. So if I'll tell you this now, the header, the nav bar, and the footer are right. So it's just the main body we're looking at. So all the CSS for the main is inside each of the HTML pages. Okay, so I've got one wee mistake on the index page.
So no margin between the text and the pictures.
Maybe give another word, 31, so maybe go for another 4 minutes. Probably won't get all the errors in this short time. This is probably an activity that I would see maybe lasting actually the whole lesson.
And this is the good thing that actually now that you've made those files available, that you can take them away and you can use them with your class.
Yeah, my plan for this website is it will eventually become I'll deconstruct it even more, and I'll actually have to build it. That's kind of what it's done. Some strange floaty stuff going wrong on the homepage.
Get yourself a pool noodle.
Or an inflatable unicorn? No, it's not. It's an inflatable assault course. Is it? I don't know. On the visits page, we've got no padding between the text boxes. And we've got a bit of picture overflow on the event page. How do you know if it's margins or padding? That is a very good question. And I think how to view it will become more apparent in one of the tools that Colin's going to show us. Okay, do we have one last wee check? We've got about a minute and then we'll move on. There's uneven heights of the columns on the visits page. We need to set the height manually. Yeah, because the text is all different sizes. Okay, there's one character column to the left of the page. Yep, on the home. Yeah, definitely some column stuff on the home page. So we've got some of the errors on this page. We'll come back to this website shortly, where I'll talk you through some of them. Not necessarily tell you them all, but we'll talk you through some of them. So we're now going to look at some debugging tools.
So I think the kind of idea behind this is that as a computing teacher, you are effectively just a professional debugger. So on slide 3A, we've kind of hopefully picked out a couple of strategies that you might be able to use yourself or use with your class to help debug some web errors.
Sorry, debugging in web, as we've touched upon, can be particularly difficult because unlike our programming language that will complain, unlike SQL that will complain, HTML and CSS just tries to make it work.
And because there's often more than one way of implementing a particular thing, so like the point that was earlier, is it padding or is it a margin? But actually you could probably do the same thing with each one, and that makes it even more difficult to try and debug.
And as we've said already, there's cases that we've probably all had where there's two pupils, the same output. The code, sorry, looks the same, but the output is completely different.
So without trying to sound too much like Top of the Pops, that's a reference for all you kids out there, we're going to go through our top 5 tips of how you can debug either codes in your class or try and train your pupils to debug on their own.
So in at number 1, it is broken code.
So that kind of top left is a slide that I use with my classes at National 5. I often have these as starters, and not necessarily just for web. I do broken code with SQL and with programs as well. It's there to help pupils to start to try and recognise their own mistakes and their own errors and help them to spot and find and fix what's gone wrong.
They might hate finding their own errors, but they will love pointing out the ones in your designed errors that you put in, and they love pointing out errors that you don't mean to make as well.
Yeah, so I've had it in the past where I've put on my slide, find the 3 errors in this code, and they've come back and said, nope, there's 4. And you're thinking, oh yeah, no, actually there are 4. You're right. So that's strategy number 1. Strategy number 2 is to just change one thing at a time.
So I'm sure we'd all encourage this with our pupils in our classes and to get the habit of do a bit, test a bit. So it's changing or adding one thing at a time and then checking that the output matches what you want it to be.
It's much easier to find and fix the errors as you go along rather than having to plough through line after line after line of code to try and find where those errors have come from.
And at number 3, it's inspect element.
So in your browser, you're able to right click on an element and choose inspect, or you can press F12 on your keyboard and you'll get a kind of panel on the right hand side like you can see in the kind of screenshot in the bottom left hand side there.
This helps you see the HTML and the CSS for the page, and you can look at different elements and see what has been applied to it.
It also quite handily shows you a wee picture of the box model that Maggie was how that actually looks as a sort of visualization.
Yeah, so if you hover over any element, it will show you the margins around it or the padding around it. And that's kind of how I use it to go, right, have they used the margin or have they used the padding? And it shows you the space that the margin and the padding take up. So number 4, add a border.
So we've already kind of come across borders as part of the kind of box model stuff. Not technically part of the higher course. For some reason, we've got margins and padding and we just sort of forgot about borders. But if you use that code in the top right-hand corner, just to be start, border, solid, 1px, 1 pixel, and then whatever color you like, it just puts a border around everything, all the elements that are on the page.
This can be very effective when looking at the effect of a float or when we're looking at the height of an element that has collapsed.
And then finally, number 5, you can use the console.
So the console log, particularly with JavaScript, when we're trying to get syntax errors in the JavaScript, because it'll show you the line number of your error.
Sometimes it can be a bit misleading because it might show you the line number of the HTML with the event as well as the JavaScript line of code with the error, but at least it gives you a step for a hint to where to look. And you can access that console just in the same way as inspect element. It's just it's the next tab over from the inspect element. You'll see the console there. So we're going to move on and we're going to look at the next slide and we're going to look at some sort of practical examples of this kind of debugging or these debugging techniques in action.
So this page that we see up in the top right corner should have 3 columns with the text in the middle of those 3 columns.
But clearly, as we can see from the output, that's not happened. So the question is, why not?
So let's start by that first approach of adding a border to it.
So if we add a border, that's what it then looks like. And you can see that that paragraph on the right-hand side is outside the div.
Oh, yeah. So all we need to do is move the closing div element to make sure it's after the paragraph.
Yeah. So if we just make one change, because we only make one change at a time and then see what that looks like, hey presto.
So this, it goes back, this goes back to Manny's bottom model. The extra border is making it the total width too wide and forcing the next element down onto a new row.
Yeah, so that box that's kind of bottom left, this one here, should be in that top right-hand corner, but because of our border, which we set as 1 pixel, that's made the content too wide. So our final fix is just to get rid of that border, and then hopefully that then gives us the output that we were expecting.
Okay, but what if there was more text than just 1 paragraph in the middle of the div?
Well, that is the scenario on our next slide on topic 3C. So you can see again in the kind of top right hand corner, you've got the original kind of setup, but now we've got 5 or 6 paragraphs underneath, which is causing us a bit of an issue. So we've got two kind of options that we could use to solve the problem. We can either get rid of the preset height and see what that does, or we can change the height to obviously increase it so it covers all that text in the paragraphs.
So at the moment, the height of the div is set to 200 pixels. So that's the blue section, but we want it to be bigger. But if I take that height out, it should just auto. So let's remove the height.
So if we've removed the height, brilliant. We've got all the paragraphs that are covered in that blue text because the height's automatically expanded to fit the content. The only problem is that the div on the left and the div on the right have now disappeared.
Oh, yeah.
So now we need to have a look at option 2. So what if we were to change the height? The question then becomes, what height do we need to make it?
Mm-hmm.
So if we get rid of that, if you use your inspect element, you get that wee sort of diagram of how the pages, the box model of that element is looking, and you can use that to help you generate the correct height. What most of my pupils would end up doing is probably just trial and error. They would go, right, well, it needs to be bigger than 200, so I'll try 500. Nope, that's too big. Right, I'll try 400. Nope, that's too small. And then sort of figure it out somewhere in between.
It's kind of well, I would say a mess. It's a tricky process of you just have to sit and really wrestle with the code.
Speaking of wrestling with the codes, if we move on to topic 3D, this was my attempt to make something that you might sort of kind of come across when the kid in your class has their hand up and they say, this doesn't work, and you look at their codes and you just sort of sigh and resign yourself. So what we want is to just change one thing at a time. In this case, they have not changed one thing at a time, and this is the code that they have produced.
Oh.
Yeah, that's fun, isn't it?
That's going to take a bit of working out how they're. Yeah, that's going to take a bit of working out.
So the question is, what color should paragraph C be?
Well, it's in the middle, so it could be black. It's got an IDC, so it could be purple, but it could be white, or it could be green. Oh, yeah, okay.
So if you said white with purple text, then you would have been right.
I
The
mean,
question then becomes, why?
and I probably got there eventually. But why? So instead of me sitting going, oh, I'm not sure, what about using expect elements to see what CSS is applied to that paragraph?
That is the kind of screenshot of the inspect element, and you can see the kind of the rules as they are and which ones have been used and which ones have been kind of overruled by other rules. And that kind of helps to give a bit of explanation as to why that particular styling has been applied.
So the rules that are scored out, I take are the ones that have been overwritten by another rule.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's just, it lets the pupils, it lets people see actually what is going on behind the scenes with that code, rather than having to kind of almost trace through, right, it started off as red, and then there was another bit that changed it to blue, and then there was another bit that changed it to purple, and trying to kind of figure it out that way. So the next question, if we move on to question number 2, is why do all the paragraphs have gaps in between them? Why are they not directly underneath each other?
So we've added a border to see the red text is tight to the text, but there are still gaps between the paragraphs, some black, some white.
And this kind of goes again back to the box model. And again, we can use our inspect element to sort of see what's going on and what's happening with this particular element. So again, this is the screenshot of the box model that's applying to that paragraph C. And you can see that there is some kind of changes that have been made, as well as our border round the outside. If we move on to that one, if we get rid of the margin that's a kind of default margin round the outside, then all those paragraphs collapse so that they're sitting right on top of each other. The kind of default setting is 1 EM of a margin, and the EM is equal to whatever the font size of the paragraph is.
And we can see that in the expect element on the previous, further earlier on the slide.
Yeah.
So if we remove the margin, then we remove the default gaps.
And then that squishes it all together. So you get a nice, well, stripy green and white and red and purple mess.
And of course, before I handed that in as my assignment, I would remove the border off it.
Yeah.
To make it look slightly better.
Better is a sort of relative term.
Yeah.
So hopefully some of that was useful. Hopefully you can take some of those hints and tips back to your class and ideally train them up in using those techniques themselves, or it at least gives you a kind of step for a hint as to where you might find some answers before you have to pour through lines and lines of horrible code.
Yeah, I mean, I certainly hadn't thought of putting a border in before, but the inspect element, once we got it enabled, was a tool that I use all the time with the code, because you can just hover over lines of code and it shows you what's happening to those lines of code.
So if you've got any feedback or any of that stuff, feel free to leave a wee post-it note. Brendan's already on it like a bonnet. He's giving us some stuff back.
Yeah. Like the borders for BGE it is. I'm assuming he's going to say it's quite easy to use.
I think of all of them, borders is the one that makes most sense.
Yes.
Rather than margin and padding. Like, you kind of know what a border is, and
Aye.
if you've used
It's going round
like
it.
Word, then you've seen a border round stuff. It's a bit baffling that it's not in the course.
Mhm.
As somebody saying, I've forgotten about inspect element. I think it's one of those when you're in the heat of the moment and you've got a class of 20 and you're trying to burrow round and everybody's done things in a slightly different way, and you get all sort of frazzled that it can be really easy to forget some of these strategies. So if you've got a few things up your sleeve, then it can always help.
Oh, debugging websites is definitely one of the most overwhelming things I find, because, as you said, you've got them all going, "This is not working," but I find that as I've demonstrated how I'm going about debugging it, my students are now beginning to go and use inspect elements themselves, and will look at things not fitting. It's particularly good inspect element when you're trying to get elements to float next to each other and you've got margins and padding, because it'll show you how the overlap.
And it might be good for those kids who we discussed earlier in Maggie's section that struggle with the maths of it, to have that visualization of, well, here's your content, and here's the padding, and here's the border, and here's the margin, and here are all the numbers. And if you add up all those numbers, you can see the total width of it. Having that as a wee diagram is going to be really helpful to some of them.
Yep. Give you a wee minute. We're actually making good time this evening.
Woohoo!
Need a snappy acronym for inspect element, or for the top 5. I'm not an acronym person. I can't think like that.
I think the difficulty is trying to avoid something that might be misconstrued when you make acronyms.
Inspect element, change one thing, border. Broken border and console.
So you can have BIC, border, inspect, console.
Yeah, border, inspect, console, a BIC. And present them with a pen every time.
Well, I'm thinking that might be advertising, so you might want to steer clear of that. Like, every time you say it, you've got to say other pen manufacturers are available.
Oh, Gordon's gone. Bring chocolate in an umbrella. And that goes with your big bar of chocolate.
We can't go chocolate again. We've done chocolate.
That's something to think about.
What, chocolate? Yeah, it's getting to that time, isn't it?
It's changed it to cheese. So what I suppose now that we've kind of looked at those debugging techniques, what we could in theory go and now do is go and apply them to the Lowland Wildlife Park. And it gives you, as opposed to just visually looking at the browser view or sitting staring at the screens of code that I've written in and try to get into my head, which is probably a weird place to get into, you could deploy some of those techniques, the inspect elements, the borders, the change one thing, to find out what the problems were. I'm not going to sit now and share what all the problems were, but if we go back up to topic 2D, and I'll unhide what I have popped in. And so I'm just going to do the visits page and the 4 main errors on this, and it kind of pulls in the ideas that the inspect element tool would be useful, some of the errors that that Maggie talked about calculations. So the first wee error is this wildcat in the bottom has got the same class as the Jaguars at the top. So therefore they're floated left, but we can't float that left because it needs we can float it left, but it needs a margin on the left-hand side, so we can't use the same ID. These three sections in the middle, these three columns in the middle, they need to be all the same height, which somebody touched upon, and they need the width to be reduced. Okay, so the wireframe wanted 15 pixel between each one. The wireframe showed the width as I think 290, but it also had, but we need to, or it didn't show the width, but we need to reduce that because we've added in our margin. And as we went through when with the box model, your widths all add up to the overall page width. And then the last one is the image would need reduced in size, just because it would then overflow with other changes we made. So that one there, it's that idea of do one thing. That error you wouldn't probably get until you'd worked out what the other errors were. What you can get hold of if you want is the fixed website. It's a public link. There's a REPL project as well, and there's the projects in the Google Drive. And I think in that Google Drive folder is all the wireframes. If you want the wireframes as well, you're welcome to them. So hopefully, what I think I'll probably do in my higher class now is give them that broken website, talk about some of the debugging techniques, and get them to use those techniques in that website. And I think that is nearly us for this evening. I think Maggie's going to come and join us and wrap up.
Yep. Okay, let's go. If we can go further down to the plenary, we've kind of got a new feedback frame available. But before we get to that, why not use some of the examples that we have shown you tonight to allow your pupils to debug web code? You could, start with some of the kind of basic calculation ones and then talk through the debugging techniques, and even, do give them, like Ian was suggesting with his pupils, give them the broken website, maybe even just a page at the time, and use those techniques to find where the errors are. And
then most importantly, getting them to prove that they've tested it and made sure it works, or, prove that they've fixed the error.
Okay, and it could even be used at advanced tile this, or you could adapt it so it was more of an N5 website and use it with your pupils across the board. Just at the moment when they're all about to start assignments, etc., it might be a useful thing to do.
And if you do use any of the resources from this session or any other previous session, it's important for us that you let us know, give us feedback on them. If you've used them in class, how did it go? If it didn't go well, what didn't go well? So that we can kind of take these resources that we've built for this session and the previous session and really kind of refine them and then get them out publicly for as many teachers across the country to use.
So over the 4 sessions, what we've covered, I think there's a frame along there that specifies that there. It's there. We've got analysis, what we did in the first session, the third, second and the third, the golden threads, the scaffolding, and if anyone was there on Saturday as well, we used these materials, some of them unplugged. Okay, so this is I'm just going to try and bring everyone to this screen here. It's keep, improve, drop, and add. If you can give us feedback on these things, then we've made that kind of new feedback frame where it's keep it, improve it. You liked it, but maybe change it a bit, drop it, we weren't sure if it would work in class at all, or if there's anything you would like us to add to what we've already done. If you could just grab a wee post-it there on, keep is green, drop is red, improve is orangey amber, and add is something that you would like us to do. So you can zoom in on each box and grab a post-it and enter your thoughts into there.
And it can be about, absolutely anything. These kind of upskilling sessions are a little bit experimental in their way. So it could be something that you liked about the delivery, you didn't like about delivery, that would make it better, or that you think we should bring into it, so that we can really try and make sessions like this as valuable as possible.
Yeah, I think the more feedback we can get, the more it helps us look at how we can take this forward. We do share a PDF of the board as well as recording it. If you've got any other materials that you've maybe used from what we've created, it'd be useful for you to upload those so that others can try them out as well. The recordings from the previous sessions are now on the reception Miro board. So you can find them on there, and then these ones will go up over the course of the next week or so. There's still another session on Thursday to go ahead.
And I suppose the beauty of the videos that are all uploaded, Brendan's sat and he's chapterized them. So as we've kind of changed topic through the session, he's put chapters in. So you can go in, you don't have to sit for the full hour and a half. You could do a wee quick 10 minutes on something and then come back to it at a later date.
Yep. So the Scottish Government asks what the impact of the upskilling and feedback is really the only way that, or the main way that question can be answered. So
before the end of February, there'll be a short evaluation survey sent out. One for the online sessions, and if you were the in-session on Saturday, one for that. So watch out then. Again, all the feedback that you provide STACS is really useful in directing where they go in the future. They've got several different plans afoot for Computer Science Teachers event before the end of the current session, some with a local focus, some with a national focus. And if you've got any ideas for what events you would like, again, you can pop them in this board or please get in touch with STACS.
Okay, and finally, please think about getting involved with STACS. It means Scottish teachers advancing computing science, so it's about us all taking this subject forward. You can find out about what this could be by following the link on the roadmap further down the board. Why not have a look just now and perhaps being inspired to follow up on it soon? Now, as usual, we'll always be hanging around for a bit of an after party when the session's ended. If you've got any questions that you want to direct to us, then please feel free to hang on and we'll try and answer the questions or get back to you as soon as we can.
But that brings our fourth and final session for now to an end. Thank you for your time this evening, and thank you for joining us. I think that the comment there about packaging all these activities up, that is, I think, the long-term plan to kind of package everything that we've done in nice wee lessons almost.
Absolutely.
We had a conversation about that last night when we were planning this one.
No, absolutely. I think having a package that we can deploy out. I think there's, and I picked this up on Saturday as well. And I'm just looking at one of the improve bits there about the recording because pupils got confused with it, and that's not really the purpose of the videos. The purpose of the videos is for upskilling teachers to then support their pupils. I'm not really convinced they should be getting used directly with the pupils. That's not what we set out to create them for. However, there are some really good tutorial videos that are pupil focused on YouTube that talk through various different skills. That are specifically targeted at Nat 5 and higher. So we might track down whoever's done them. And
sorry, I didn't realise you were talking about eSchool there.
And and get them shared out as well, because they're more pupil focused than
Yeah.
than these ones. These are very focused on teachers upskilling
But it's
rather
nice.
than,
Yeah.
and the pedagogy rather than.
Uh-huh.
But yeah, I think it's been 4 really good sessions, and the day on Saturday, the Saturday morning was really good as well. It was great to catch up with folk, and all good. Yeah.